So good morning, everyone on YouTube and Zoom and in the Gampa. Welcome. I see that Gendon has arrived. He's going to come in and get his laptop all set up, and then we'll begin once all that happens. So just bear with us another couple minutes or so. If you're on Zoom, it is great if you can turn on your camera, if that works for you, so that you are part of the class. The teachers do like to see your lovely faces.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here with all of you on this Sunday, beautiful day. And also to be here at Kadampa, my last day here, unfortunately, but anyway. Did you need to say something, Linda, then to everyone?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and get started. We're happy that you're here, and thank you for coming. And please come back again.
Oh, thank you. All right, so today we're going to talk about gratitude. And I think we'll start, do you normally start Sundays with a prayer? Yeah, we'll do just the refuge prayer. I think most of you know this prayer. It encapsulates kind of two main ideas. First, to whatever sense of kind of reliance upon these teachings that you have in your life. Some of you may not consider yourself to be Buddhist per se. That's okay. We're just simply talking about that we find some value in the Buddhist teachings, in particular the Dharma. Anyway, then the last two lines are where we bring some positive intention to being here, and we'll even reflect on that a little bit in a short meditation after we do these prayers together. So again, we'll recite this. I think today we'll just do this in English 3 times and kind of let these words sink in, again, to the best of your understanding.
And if you are in the Gampa, it's page 34 in the Gold Prayer Book.
I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, by the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, by the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, let's do a short meditation. We'll even bring in a little bit of gratitude into the meditation. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is kind of how to integrate a spirit of gratitude or gratefulness in our lives. So let's just find a comfortable meditation posture. I think most of you know, just some place where the body's somewhat upright, the back straight. You can close your eyes if you wish, or simply bring your eyes to a place where there's just a little bit of light coming in. And begin to attend to the breath. This is how we kind of stabilize our mind, is by using the breath as an anchor. You can meditate on the breath in a variety of ways. If you have a way that you prefer, then just do that for the next few minutes. If you need a suggestion, I generally suggest working with the sensation at the tip of the nose, where we feel the air coming in through the nostrils and then going back out. But just try to stay focused on that sensation right in that area. And then when we see that the mind wanders away, which it tends to do, there's no judgment. We just simply let go of whatever it was that distracted us and bring the mind back to the breath. So I'll ring the chime here to begin, and then we'll do a few minutes in silence, and then I'll lead you in a short meditation, guided meditation. So now let's do a short reflection on the spirit of gratitude that we're working with today in this class. What I'd like to invite you to do is to just think about everything that has created the possibility for you to be here right now. Sitting here at Kadampa Center, we can start with just the things in this physical space that we can have a spirit of gratitude towards. The chairs, the cushions that we're sitting on, those didn't come from nowhere. There were beings involved in creating those. The room that we're sitting in, this building, again, many different factors came into play for us to be able to have this beautiful space to come together. As we think about each of these things, just even in this room, we can have this feeling of appreciation, of gratitude, recognizing that due to others' kindness, we have this in our lives now. And really appreciating that. And bring your awareness to the other people in the room. A Dharma center doesn't exist for just you, it exists for many people to come, to share in the Dharma together, to create community, and develop a deep sense of appreciation and gratitude for the people who are in the room here with you today, for everyone in this community. Without them, the center wouldn't be here. And then even in regard to yourself being here, all the things that contributed to your presence in this room right now. Just looking back, prior to coming here, the things that helped you to be able to partake of these teachings, the car, vehicle that you came in, all the beings involved in creating that, the roads that you drove on. Again, they don't create a road for just one person. They create a road so many people can drive on it and get to the destinations that they need to go to. So many factors where if we open our eyes and our hearts, we can see how much we do depend upon others, even to do something simple like coming here to Kadampa Center. And we can extend our gratitude to all the beings that make it possible for us to be sitting here right now. And just try to immerse yourself in that feeling of gratitude. Not just the thoughts, but the open-heartedness that is at the root of our gratitude. And then from that space of open-heartedness, let's set our intention, our motivation for today, for the time we have together, to explore this topic of an attitude of gratitude so that we can become more cognizant of the interdependence we have with all beings. And we can be dedicated to not just working on our own welfare, our own well-being, but moreover for the well-being of all sentient beings. And think that it's for this reason that we're gathered here today, each of us individually, having that strong intention to benefit all sentient beings, the sources of all that brings us individually happiness, all of these beings involved, again in this network of interdependence, and just holding that strong motivation throughout this session. Okay. Again, so I hope that was a nice little introduction to gratitude. We're going to go into more detail on this. I want to share a little passage that I just came across. One of my kind of hats I wear back in Santa Fe is that I sit with our interfaith group. Sorry, I didn't get this out beforehand. Oh well, I'll just use, we'll make it work. In the interfaith meeting that we just had this past Tuesday, we do it on the second Tuesday of every month. Some of the people there indicated that this woman who I'd never heard of before, actually, Diana Butler Bass, she's a Christian author, I think in the Methodist Church, I don't know for sure, but she's written a number of books, and I went to kind of check her out then because she's coming to Santa Fe to do a couple of talks in March of next year. And I thought, well, I'll see who this person is, because I'm curious about people from other faiths who have something to offer. And she actually has a book called Grateful. And I thought, let me check that out. And I didn't get the book yet, but I went to the kind of preview of it on Amazon. And there's this wonderful little thing that it starts with. This is from the prologue. She says, I pulled the card from the envelope, appreciatively fingering its velvety thickness. It was formal and traditional, the sort one rarely sees anymore, with a single word embossed on the front, grateful. I opened it and read, thank you for the lovely thank you note. I read it again just to make sure. It was a thank you note for a thank you note. Now what? Do you send a thank you note for the thank you note received for sending a thank you note? Was there a rule for this? I have never been very good at these things. Writing the original note was hard enough. I considered it a mannerly triumph, but what happens when someone thanks you for saying thanks? Should you return thanks again? This could go on forever, right? Like in an endless regress. You just keep thanking people for the thank you note, the thank you note for the thank you note. So she says then, I sighed, I held the kind note in my hand, not knowing what was right or proper. Saying thank you can be so complicated. And this is where, when it comes down to what we're talking about today, this is really an actually very simple practice. And it's meant to be very simple and kind of embraced in its simplicity. But it can become complicated, it can get complicated very fast. And suddenly, we're not sure exactly how to invoke this spirit of gratitude in our lives. Because it's not just, one of the things that I found interesting about her passage is that it points out a few of the mistakes in gratitude, if you will. Before we get into talking about gratitude, we can see that, first of all, it's not really kind of simply good manners. I think there is something appropriate about good manners, right? We all learned that when we were quite young. Say thank you. What do you say? Say thank you. It's nice to be able to kind of be mannerly, to be civil with other people and have kind of a good feeling that comes about by that. But I think when we talk about gratitude, we're talking about something more than good manners. We're also talking about something that is more than just simply politeness, just to be polite, be a kind person. There's a kindness behind it, but I think, again, if we're simply being polite or simply doing it out of thinking that we want to have some good manners, well, then I think that that's not really the spirit of gratitude that we're looking at. The other thing, of course, is to make sure that it's not mere reciprocity, that we're simply, oh, well, you did this for me and I do that for you. And this is kind of the spirit of what she's talking about here, right? You send a thank you note for a thank you note, and then you thank you note for the thank you note for the thank you note. Is it just simply that you feel like there's an indebtedness that goes with this? Because you've done something for me, I have to do something for you. And it is nice. Again, I'm not saying there's anything kind of wrong with those sorts of ways of more transactional gratitude, if you will. I just think it needs to be something more than that. And I haven't read the book, so I don't know if she goes on to kind of talk about that spirit of gratitude. But that's kind of the way I generally teach this. This is a subject I've actually been teaching since like 2007, not every day by any means, but something that I go back to frequently whenever I'm asked to teach on this subject of gratitude. And when I go back to my notes from 2007, the first time I taught it, I just see that there's that common thread that goes through it about this being something more than just this sort of transactional way of being in the world. Because what we're going to be mostly focusing on is a spirit of gratitude that we generate within ourselves that may not have anything to do with extending a more formal thank you to people and what have you. If we can do that, That's great. I think it's a wonderful way, again, to be connecting with others. That's a dimension of our Buddhist practice, and it's a dimension of every spiritual practice. We don't practice in isolation, we practice with others. So if you can extend gratitude through doing various things for other people and, doing something special, unexpected, but it should always have a kind of heartfeltness to it. It shouldn't be something that feels like I'm doing it because people are expecting me to do it. And if I don't do it, then I'm going to look really bad. And I mean, these are not the states of mind we want to bring to this at all. Robert Emmons, who is actually a researcher who's done a lot of research on gratitude, I find it really quite interesting. One time when I was here at Kadampa Center previously, I taught a little course called Breaking Free of Harmful Habits or Letting Go of Harmful Habits. I can't remember the exact title. And in there I cited some work by a woman named Barbara Fredrickson. She's actually at Chapel Hill University. Is it University of Chapel Hill? I don't know what the exact name of it is, but she's a university professor there, and she's done a lot of research on positive psychology. In our culture, Western psychology tends to be more oriented towards, the negative things that are going on and trying to bring people from those negative states back to a state of balance, rather than focusing on the positive states to enrich all of our lives. And she wrote this book, Positivity, that was based on all of her research into various factors that contribute to our general sense of well-being. And so anyway, Robert Emmons is a similar kind of researcher, but focusing specifically on gratitude. There's a number of people out there that are doing quite amazing work. Kristen Neff, who does a lot of work on self-compassion, for example. A lot of these are things that we need in our world more, because there's a lot of negativity out there, and we do have a bit of a negative bias. Always looking for kind of what's wrong. This actually, they say, goes back to primitive days when we had to be very kind of suspicious of what's going on around us, because some creature could come eat us in the middle of, us eating our meal or something. So this is a negative bias that we want to be counteracting all the time if we can, with feelings that are positive. I think gratitude is one of the richest ones. And its sort of companion, which isn't identical, excuse me, but very similar. Sorry, just did that into the microphone. I didn't mean to do that. Which is called gratefulness, which is actually slightly different. Again, I'll talk about that shortly. But gratitude is definitely something, according to Robert Emmons, that has amazing benefits. And he says it essentially has two main components. The very first one is it's an affirmation of goodness that we've received. We have been the beneficiary of goodness, that we have goodness in our lives. This is what we did in the reflection, right? Is that we just begin to acknowledge some very simple things that are in our lives. It's like as you sit here right now, the chair or cushion you're sitting on, the building that you're in, and the community that is around you, all of these things you have received. They are a part of kind of enriching your life. But the second part of it is, according to him, it's a recognition that the sources of this goodness are outside ourselves. I'm not saying we can't be grateful also for the things that we ourselves do, but oftentimes those still do rely on other people to some degree. We're going to talk about this more from a Buddhist perspective shortly. But this is kind of the overarching side of it, is that we recognize that we are not the creators of our own well-being and happiness. That the things that we have, yes, we kind of feel this sense of self-sufficiency, right? I go to work and I get my paycheck, and that provides the money for me to be able to do the things I do. I'm the one that's creating all of this. Well, the reality is no matter how much you make and no matter what your job is, you are still dependent upon others. This gets to the Buddhist concept of interdependence, something we've been talking about this weekend in the weekend course at a much more kind of deeper level, more profound level. But everything depends upon other factors. There's nothing in this world that arises independently on its own. The things you have, the goodness that you've received, that you are grateful for, hasn't arisen in isolation. I think during the pandemic, I point this out frequently, during the pandemic, this should have hit home if nothing else, right? When we were dealing with the very serious stages at the beginning, and it all goes into lockdown, and some of you perhaps weren't in lockdown because you had more critical jobs for the well-being of others, you were the ones helping everyone else to have what we needed, right? If we went down to the store, The stores if all the stores were closed, we couldn't get, the food that we needed, we couldn't have the things that supported us, we would have all been in miserable shape, right? But due to the kindness of many others who continued to grow the food that we need, continued to package it and ship it and stock it on the shelves and sell it to us and prepare it at times. I mean, we had so many people involved in sustaining our lives. And what an incredible kindness. And there was room then in that space of that experience to have deep gratitude, to every day of our lives, to recognize how much we depend upon others. But this is the truth in the pandemic and not in the pandemic. We always have depended on others. This is kind of the core teaching that underlines this kind of way we practice gratitude in Buddhism, is with the recognition that we do depend upon so many other beings for our own well-being. And of course, what we see again is that from that gratitude, we then have a much deeper connection to others that allows us to help with their well-being. And this, of course, is part of our Buddhist path as well. So I think this is an important aspect to emphasize, is that we depend upon others. To highlight this, I'm going to go back to a little thing I shared when I was originally preparing this talk back in 2007. I remembered a Twilight Zone episode that I saw, and I actually watched it again just to make sure that I was kind of getting the gist of it. Burgess Meredith was in it. I remember Burgess Meredith primarily as the Penguin and Batman, in the 60s. He was a good actor, but anyway, in this, he was this guy named Henry Bemis, and Henry Bemis worked for some bank or something, and he was this bookworm. He really loved to read his books, and so like every lunch break, he would go down into the vault that was down underneath the main floor of the bank, and he would read his books. And when he had to go up and be with other people and do his job and everything, he hated it. He just wanted to get back down to his books. And he even started making this sort of wish of, wouldn't it be wonderful if all these people went away so I could just have peace and quiet and read my books, right? We've all had that kind of attitude. Maybe we're not bookworms, but sometimes we get all these people off the planet for once and for all so I can just have some peace and quiet. Well, he was an extreme of this, right? Where he just really wanted this. Well, his wish came true. There was an atomic bomb of some sort and all the people die. And so he has no more people around that bother him. He's all by himself. He was down in the vault reading his book when all this happened, so he wasn't affected by it. So he comes out, and of course, initially he's a bit shocked. Then he starts smiling, like, this is what I've been wishing for, All these people are gone, And so he goes to the bookstore or library, whatever, and he starts, all these books, and he goes, now I have the time to read all the books that I could possibly want to read. And I didn't tell you, but he's got really thick glasses. Henry Bemis is, practically blind. And it so happens that as he's carrying this load of books, his glasses fall off and they break. And he has no opportunity to read his books now. He's lost his vision, so it's kind of, and there's no one to fix his glasses, right? Because everybody's gone. So be careful what you wish for is kind of the moral. But I think it's also, don't neglect the interdependence we have with others. We are so dependent upon them. We're going to talk about this a little bit later about how we bring this into our lives, but you can have gratitude every single moment of your life because every moment is made possible through the kindness of other beings. There's no time in our lives when we can be absent from that. And I'm not saying you should practice that way where you don't have anything but the mind of gratitude in your thinking and what have you, but it's useful to at least introduce it more in our lives. I do want to speak to some of the benefits that are highlighted around gratitude that Robert Emmons has found in his research. Again, he's not a Buddhist, but I find what's interesting about so much of this positive psychology that is going on, the research into it, is that it completely supports what Buddhism has been saying for centuries, right? That if we acknowledge that there are kind of negative things, negative minds like this Henry Bemis character, right? The negative mind of kind of being a bit misanthropic, just not wanting other people to be around, getting just really disgusted with humanity. I mean, that's not a good attitude to have. We have these positive states of mind that act as antidotes to that. If we actually open our hearts with gratitude and connection to everyone around us, then we have a very different attitude that we live with every day. And we're much happier people. And the people around us are much happier people because we are influencing them by virtue of us having more positive states of mind. And of course, in Buddhism, we want to take those positive states of mind all the way to an immeasurable degree. So let's talk a little bit about kind of first the psychological benefits of gratitude. Robert Emmons points out that there's more optimism. We individually have more happiness and joy, greater self-worth, greater enthusiasm, and even this wonderful word called contentment. We live in a culture that is driven so much by more, right? They keep introducing another iPhone, and what are they up to now? I have no idea. I never bought any iPhones, but I just got my first smartphone this year. Yay. What are they up to? Does anyone know? 15? I mean, did we need 15? I mean, I don't know. I mean, they keep introducing a new one. I was saying the other day about this wonderful example about how people just want to, have things. When they introduced the iPad some years ago, I remember in Albuquerque, there's an Apple store, and they had reporters there that were talking to the people that were waiting in line, because people waited in line like from the night before, or maybe even the day before. They were just dying to get this product. And they asked this one man, they said, so you're here to get an iPad? And he says, oh yes, I want to get an iPad. He says, do you know what it does? And he says, no, but I want one. Doesn't have any idea, because of course when they introduced it, there was a bit of mystery around it, right? And so do we need all that? If we actually have a spirit of kind of gratefulness, gratitude, well then, do we need so much? Is it important that we have a feeling of more, or can we just rest in some level of contentment? The great Buddhist master Nagarjuna says that this is a treasure actually no one can rob from you, your contentment. It's kind of interesting, if you have all those things, people can take them from you, right? You can be without them. You can lose them. You have to lose them at the end of this life anyway. You're going to do that at some point. But if you have contentment, you carry that with you all the time. It's a richness of mind that we will never have to part with, in a sense. So this is one of the highlights of the psychological benefits. You have less envy, right? You're not always looking to others. You actually can be grateful for what you have. You have less anxiety, less depression, more compassion, generosity of resources, and even being able to give your time and be of service to others when you are working with a grateful mind. You also, of course, have the spirit of forgiveness. I've just taught a day-long workshop on forgiveness up in New York at our center there, Shantideva Center. It's not something we talk about a lot in Buddhism. And I have even read some articles that say forgiveness isn't really Buddhist, because we get into teachings around karma and what have you, but it is a way to alleviate suffering. If we are more grateful for what we have, and even grateful for the people in our lives who challenge us, then we can more willingly forgive. I'm going to talk about this too a little bit later today, of just how everyone in our life we can have some gratitude for, some appreciation of the role they play in our well-being. We even have, beyond psychological benefits, all those that I just highlighted, we have physical benefits. It's kind of interesting. They're finding, as they study people who are encouraged to practice gratitude more, and I think they have things in their studies that will remind people to practice gratitude and what have you, so they have thoughts of gratitude. Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough, his partner in doing this research, they've shown that people experience stronger immune systems. They have lower blood pressure, improved sleep, fewer aches and pains. They exercise more, took better care of their health. In general, they have greater physical resilience, but they even have that mental resilience, that psychological resilience. This is pretty amazing. Have I convinced you to buy gratitude yet? These are kind of like the sales pitch, right? In terms of social benefits, obviously this is true too, right? People who have gratitude in their hearts get along much better with everyone around them, right? You have stronger relationships. You have less loneliness. I know a lot of people who struggled with the loneliness of the pandemic, right? It was a lot of time in solitude. And if you were used to having kind of the connections that you had before the pandemic and were suddenly faced with the reality of being on your own, some people were in homes, apartments on their own, with no one else around. Then, that loneliness is difficult, very challenging for people. But, gratitude makes you, again, more receptive to other people in your life, makes you less like Henry Bemis wanting everybody to disappear off the planet, and more like a person who really appreciates what other people offer. Because again, everyone is offering you something, some sort of gift. If you're willing to take a look at it, we'll talk about that again shortly. And then, of course, it benefits beyond ourselves to others and even to our world. I mean, if we're all living within that spirit of gratitude, then I think the world will benefit. I mean, from some of these things as well. If we have more contentment, well, maybe we don't need to keep like ramping everything up and constantly trying to get more resources to have all the gadgets and things that we need and what have you. You can be kind of content with what you do have. We talked about on Tuesday night this idea of being more conscious of aging and of aware of the process, where, you know, when we get into our older years in particular, it's nice to simplify our lives somewhat, but it's nice to simplify your life at any time, you know, rather than getting on that kind of accumulation thing and just from the moment you can start to acquire things, begin to fill a house with all sorts of stuff. Venerable Rabina, who many of you know, I think she was here not that long ago, right? She was amazing in terms of, she would arrive at the airport and she'd have like a little carry-on bag, not like a huge suitcase, I mean, just like a little bag, and she'd throw it in the back seat and she says, all my worldly possessions. Wow, you know, I couldn't fit what I have into a little bag like that, right? She's living in New York City in an apartment now that she's had to furnish because she's never had anything. So now she's got more possessions. She can't travel with all of them, but nonetheless, you know, simplify your life if you can and be grateful for what you have. Be content with what you have. I think these are important things that we can do individually that also then support the world around us. Another talk I did in New York on this little tour I'm on right now was around the environment and the effects that we're having on the environment and how to somewhat ameliorate them through our conscious action and doing things. And one of them is, of course, you know, divorce ourselves to some degree from all of that. I'm emphasizing that to some degree because I see how much it is a problem in our culture. You know, we're influenced greatly by the advertising and the always wanting to have more and better and what have you. You know, just have what we need, have what works for us, and we'll be much more content with a spirit of gratefulness, gratitude for what we do have. I find it interesting when you go to some cultures where you would think people would be pretty miserable because they don't have all the comforts that we have. They're actually even more content and grateful, like in Nepal and India and what have you. People have an incredible spirit of just relishing life and not necessarily being about all the things. Anyway, I'm sorry I'm getting on that little jag, but I think it's important while we're talking about that to sort of examine the way in which gratitude can overcome some of that, kind of diminish some of that spirit of always wanting to acquire. So before we go on to some of the things that I want to share around gratitude practices and that, and I do want to first also talk about Buddhist perspectives on things we should be grateful for and so on. I want to really distinguish, which is kind of an interesting that's come out of Brother David Stundal-Rast. I don't know if you know him. I had this amazing good fortune to meet him. He's a Benedictine monk, and his whole life has been kind of dedicated to this idea of gratefulness. And he uses that term gratefulness much more than gratitude. Let me read a little passage. It's from one of the people that worked very closely with him, a woman named Christy Nelson. She wrote a book that just came out maybe a year or so ago called Wake Up Grateful. She says, gratefulness is gratitude for life. It reminds us that in simply being alive, we are always receiving. While gratitude, as we know it, needs something good to happen, gratefulness only needs us to be awake. Let me read that again. While gratitude needs something good to happen, gratefulness only needs us to be awake. It's kind of another level of our practice of gratitude, where we simply have a grateful spirit just by opening our eyes, just by being aware, just by being awake. We do not need to do anything, she says, to feel grateful, or wait for anything more. We merely need to allow ourselves to notice and be wowed by things we so often overlook and tend to take for granted in the lives we already have. Trying to do a little experiment with that with the meditation today, right? Just to stop everything. We have this wonderful moment of quiet and peace that we're here in the Kadampa together. And we just kind of become aware. And you don't even have to open your eyes. You just simply have to think about all the things that you take for granted. Again, you come into this Gompa many times, many of you, I'm sure, and sat in the same chairs or cushions or whatever. And do you think about the cushion that you're sitting on, the chair you're sitting on, and the kindness of somebody who allowed that to be here? And somebody even way back when invented the chair, right? I don't know what they sat on rocks, I guess, before then, something. Or, the cushions, all of this, so many people involved in creating these things. We don't have any of these things without the kindness of others. So this idea of kind of gratefulness being a deeper sense of appreciation that just simply allows us to wake up and pay attention to what's going on. We can do this with our own bodies, just pay attention to what contributes to your well-being. We can have gratefulness for things beyond other people, right, that contribute to things. You can have gratefulness for nature. Look at all the greenery out here that produces the oxygen that we need to breathe. Found it kind of interesting. Somebody posted this on Facebook. Sorry, these little thoughts come into my head and I feel like sharing them. I really like this one. Somebody posted, they said, if trees were able to produce Wi-Fi signals, we'd plant so many of them so we'd have Wi-Fi everywhere. She says, and then the quote said, it's a shame they only produce the oxygen we need to live, right? It's kind of like our priorities are a little screwy, They produce the oxygen that we need to live, folks, Let's really appreciate the trees, the greenery that creates the oxygen that we need. And of course, we're in a symbiotic relationship with those trees and what have you. We produce the carbon dioxide that they need in order to thrive and survive. So we can just open our eyes to that reality from this place of simply having appreciation for what is here right now. You don't need someone to do something for you, like Diana Butler Bass's thing of like always, wanting to reciprocate with thank you for the thank you and all this. You don't need that to kind of happen. It doesn't have to be transactional. It's really just opening our eyes, being mindful, being aware. There's a whole practice that I'll be going into shortly that comes from Brother David's, his whole practice around gratefulness. It's really quite sweet. So let's talk a little bit though about kind of to ground this in the Buddhist teachings that most of us have had quite a bit of exposure to through Geshe Gelug's kindness of many of our other teachers. At the very beginning of what's known again as the Lam Rim, I think most of you know this term, it's how the stages of developing our minds is set out in this tradition, all the way to enlightenment. The very beginning, we have kind of two things that we're told to be very, very grateful for. First is the kindness of our gurus, our teachers. And we wouldn't be here again without that. When I was going through the little analysis and the meditation about all the things that make it possible for us to be here, one of the big factors is our gurus. If it wasn't for the kindness of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in exile from his home country, and then all those great teachers that followed him, especially Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, we wouldn't be here. And of course, we have those as individual spiritual guides, whoever those beings might be for us, that we rely upon for these teachings. And this is true in almost every tradition. You've got some sort of founder, some person who was really central, who allowed people to have access to that wisdom, that knowledge, and they continue to practice it due to the kindness of other instructors and teachers. But in our tradition, this is a particularly important point, because we see that without those guides, we would be lost. We wouldn't have the Buddha's teachings in our lives. So that's kind of interesting. We have a spirit of gratitude right at the beginning in the most foundational teaching that is on the stages of the path, to be really grateful for the kindness of these beings who make that possible. Secondly, we have the introductory topic of this precious human rebirth or perfect human life, whatever we want to call this or refer to this. This is kind of acknowledging that the conditions have come together in this human life that you still have right now. You didn't die last night. You're still here in the Gompa, breathing with your heart beating. Wonderful. Be grateful for that. This human life is really incredible in terms of the opportunity that it presents. If we compare ourselves to our pets, and some of you may not have pets, but pets, dogs and cats and rats and mice and whatever other people have. Our pets don't have this potential, right? They're sweet. They teach us a lot. You can actually learn a lot from our pets, but they don't have the potential to develop their minds. They don't have the potential to sit in a Gompa like this and get these teachings. And if they were here, they'd probably be sleeping, They wouldn't be paying much attention, wouldn't get much out of that. Might plant some seeds, as Rinpoche says, in their mental continuum because they're around the Dharma. But they can't do this with their lives. We have this opportunity. That's pretty amazing. You can have gratitude that we have this opportunity right now and that we've had this opportunity for this human life. And we can also use this life to create the opportunity for lives beyond this that are equally opportune. How wonderful. So those two topics kind of introduce us to the idea of really like relishing in the reality we have right now that we should never forget. This is the main thought that should be guiding all of our spiritual practices, that we are under the guidance of amazing beings who have imparted their wisdom through the centuries that we can benefit from, and we are in a human state where we can take advantage of that. Congratulations, you've won the lottery. I remember Rinpoche, when he was teaching at Light of the Path once, he said he would be watching, we call it soccer in this country, right? But he called it football because that's what they call it in the rest of the world, But anyway, he was saying that, when they score a goal, that everyone's like this, doing all this. And he says, we should be doing this every day because of having this perfect human life, and what we have in this conditions that we've created. One thing I want to throw out here is that you might think, well, isn't it true that I created this human life through my own karma, though? I mean, we hear that as well in our teachings, right? That this is a product of our own past actions. Well, should we really have a gratitude for it? Because we created it. And it goes kind of against the grain of what I was saying earlier, that there's an interdependence involved in everything. But you didn't create that karma independently, right? You needed other beings to create that karma. For example, all the resources you have, and I know all of you have some resources because you've got clothes on your body, you look well fed, you made it here, you've got some sort of means of getting here. All those resources you have, you think come from, again, your paycheck or the money that you accumulated through retirement and whatever. All of those things you think come from that. That is a factor, that's a condition. But the main reason why you have them is your own karma that you created through being generous to others. You needed those other beings in order to be generous to, or else you wouldn't have these resources. So you don't create karma in a vacuum. You create karma in relation to others. The main reason why you have this human life is your practice of morality. And you needed other beings to be moral in relation to avoid killing them and stealing from them and harming them in a variety of ways. If you didn't have those beings, you couldn't create that karma. So don't think that because we have this idea of, oh, this is my creation, I created this karmically through my own actions. Well, yeah, but, you depended upon other people for these actions. You don't make karma, again, in a vacuum, on your own, in solitary. All right? So these first two thoughts are really quite important to constantly go back to. Maybe there's like 3 thoughts you should start your day with that would be really wonderful. First, acknowledging that you have another day of this perfect life. How grateful you can be just in that moment, just appreciating that you've woken up with a functioning mind, a functioning body. Many people go to sleep and don't wake up again. And I was telling on my way over here to Alex and Sandra that my sister-in-law went to sleep after she's pretty sick, went to sleep in the morning at like 8 o'clock, back to bed so she'd feel better when she woke up later. She never woke up. Her son went in to find her dead in her bed at around noon. Had a heart attack of some sort. She was only 51, 52. So there's an amazing gift that we have another day in this life. How grateful we can be. Secondly, we can also be grateful that, again, we've all found the Buddha's teachings to some degree. Again, whether you consider yourself Buddhist or not isn't important, but you found some teachings that resonate with you, that make you a better person, that increase your positive qualities and reduce your negative ones. And that's through the kindness of our gurus. And wake up with that thought, a deep appreciation for those beings that gave you these teachings. But then, of course, the other thought that Rinpoche always encourages us to have so that we don't waste that day is to think, yeah, but this could be it. This could be the last day. That I'm benefiting from everything that I've created, and that is part of this network of benefit that I've received. This could be the end of this life. This could be my last day. So I'm going to use this day as best as I can from that spirit of gratitude and a recognition that it's urgent that I actually take advantage of the time I have. So I would, it's just a little aside, often Rinpoche just says, wake up with that thought, this could be my last day. He actually says you should think, this is my last day. Not like it's an affirmation, like, oh, this is my last day, this is my last day, this is, you don't want to kind of make that come true or anything. But the idea is if you live your day thinking it is your last day, you'll live your day very differently. You might think about, well, do I really need to do that? Is that so important? Or even when negative states of mind come up, you might go, oh, I don't really want to plant those seeds because this is my last day. But anyway, I'm throwing that out there because I think it is important while we talk about having this perfect life to also recognize that we don't have it forever. It doesn't go on forever. Another way that we really see the spirit of gratitude and gratefulness in the Buddhist teachings is when we get to generating this higher state of mind at the third level of the stages of the path. Again, most of you know this. At the first level, you're really mostly focused on how do I get this opportunity again? Because if you don't plant the seeds, again, through your morality, generosity, and so on, you don't get this opportunity again. Hate to say it, it's not magic. It doesn't happen, out of nowhere. It happens due to the causes and conditions. All right, so we get first level, wanting that. Second level, wanting to be free of rebirth and continuing on this cycle of existence once and for all. The third level, though, is when you see that not only do I want that for myself, I want that for all beings. Therefore, I want to become a Buddha so I can benefit them. So one of the ways that we get this mind that is intent upon doing that, bodhicitta, which we're kind of meditating on in the meditation today at the end, a mind that wishes to benefit others, that wishes to bring them to their greatest happiness, is by thinking about the connection we have with those others, recalling their kindness. We do this as part of these meditations that help us to cultivate bodhicitta. So what I want to focus on right now before we go over some of these techniques is how we can see any being who falls into one of the three categories that we tend to put beings in, just naturally, that they all are showing us kindness so that we can be appreciative of all beings. Again, be appreciative of the trees. Thank you, trees. I appreciate you producing oxygen. But the beings in this world are the main focus of bodhicitta, right? Because those are who we want to benefit. Those are the beings who are caught just like us in this cycle of existence. So we quite naturally divide beings into three camps. And there's nothing wrong with this in a sense. I'm not saying that this is faulty necessarily. We have beings that we're obviously quite close to. We're going to use the label friends for those. Might not be, might be acquaintances, but it's people we get along with, we think well of. And it's generally people in our immediate circle. It's not somebody, we might think well of, celebrities or what have you, but we don't necessarily consider them friends. They're strangers to us to some degree. But nonetheless, these are people that we can see there's a spirit of gratitude quite naturally. We can be grateful for them because they generally do contribute to our well-being very directly and intentionally, moreover. Most of the people in this circle do things for us because they like us, how wonderful. Like Sally Field, you really like me, you really, really like me. Some of you aren't getting my references, sorry. I'm too old for some of you in the room, but anyway. So the idea is that those people, it's kind of easy to be grateful for. And sometimes maybe they do fall out of favor with us because they say or do something that we don't like. So we have to really kind of get back to that place of having some gratefulness for them in our lives. But they do help us have some measure of happiness and well-being, right? And every one of us needs some group of people, even if it's just a handful of people, who reinforce us with that view. The people who are friends, the people who are companions, close ones. The second group are the opposite, right? The people who are, we're going to call them enemies, but this word enemy, again, going back to Batman, that was like the arch enemy, the Penguin and the Riddler and the Joker. I mean, we don't have those kinds of enemies in our life, I don't think. But we have people who annoy us, right? And people who are difficult. And sometimes that is people we know on a national or world scale that are not even in our lives directly, but the things they do, the things they say, they really don't sit well with us. We don't feel good thinking about them or being with them. Some of them do actually, cause some harm to us. We've been harmed by people in our lives. Every one of us has wounds from people who we've had that interaction with, where they've said or even perhaps physically done things to us that were quite harmful. It gets to be really hard to have gratitude for those beings. Now, again, within this third scope, we also are looking at the concept that even those most challenging, difficult experiences of suffering, problems, all of those are rich, rich doors for awakening, because they give us an opportunity to really get past so much of our garbage. Why are we having such a negative attitude towards particular beings? It's right here, right? It's the I that we're kind of revolving around, and us cherishing this strong sense of my well-being. And if you don't conform with what I need and want in my life, well then, sorry, but get out of my life, what have you. We have this strong aversion to all these people. Why? Because they're not satisfying our sense of self and who we think we are, and so on. Investigating that a bit this weekend too with the teachings, the deeper errors we're making there. But just the fact that we kind of put ourselves up in this central position and think that everyone is supposed to kind of conform to what we want is such a misguided idea. And many of those people that we have a strong dislike for, again, they're doing something that is harming us, but they may be helping a lot of other people. A lot of other people may think that they're the cat's meow. They really love that person. They think that that person is everything. Remember Venerable Rabina, she talked once about how even Adolf Hitler loved his little doggy woggies. I think that's the term she used. And the doggy woggies probably had their little tails wagging because they loved Adolf. They were like, oh, Adolf. So, even the most despicable people on this planet that we might, have a strong feeling of animosity towards, also have beings that love them. People in their lives that think very differently. In their perspective, they're in the friend category, right? For those people. For us, they're in the enemy category. Really depends upon our own individual experience and view. But again, it's all from this central point of this me and what's important to me. Then we have, of course, the third group of people. The third group of people is everyone else. It's all the beings that we just haven't, I think Pema Chodron, she says, they're the people who haven't become our friends or enemies yet, yet. Maybe at some point they will. We'll have some run-in at the grocery store parking lot where, suddenly some stranger comes up to us and is like really upset at the way we've parked or whatever. Who knows, Those people are we have a real sort of indifference towards those people, right? We have kind of a strong feeling of closeness and even attachment, desire for the people who are friends. We have a strong feeling of aversion, maybe even anger or hatred towards the enemies. Towards the strangers, it's kind of just a blah feeling, kind of indifference. Now, sometimes things break through there, right? Where we can our hearts open when we see like the suffering in Libya and Morocco and Maui and all these disasters that have happened recently, where we kind of go, I don't know those people, but I really feel for them, that they're dealing with so much suffering right now. It's nice that we can have that kind of empathy at that level because of our shared humanity and what have you. But in general, we tend to neglect all the strangers. But those strangers are also people who contribute to your welfare, right? I think we have people from around the world now, right, with our global economy, getting fruit from Argentina and all these places, right? Thank you, Argentina, for all of your fruit that you provide in the winter months when it's summer down there and what have you. I mean, we have a global interrelationship now in an even more pronounced way. And many of these strangers are growing the food that you eat. Many of these strangers are sewing the clothes that you wear, producing the microchips that are in your computers and phones, whatever. All of this is happening due to the kindness of many people who are strangers to you. So all three of these groups, we've seen a way that we can see them as kind, because we can see the friends quite easily because they're directly and quite intentionally kind to us. We can see the enemies even as having some measure of kindness because they're giving us opportunities to use what is happening in a very deep spiritual way. Didn't go into that in as much detail. These are wonderful teachings. It's part of what's called the Lojong, the mind transformation teachings, where we actually see that we can use what's happening to us in a negative way to enhance our compassion and our other qualities and get rid of this strong sense of revolving around just me and my own needs. And the enemies are the biggest test of that, right? Because they're not being directly kind, they're being the opposite. They're being directly unkind according to society. And they are doing that in a way that is quite hard for us to experience. I'm not denying that we're experiencing what we call suffering or pain. We're just saying, can I use it in a positive way? Thank you, enemies, for being in my life, And then we have the strangers who, again, are involved in this whole web of interdependence and producing things that we benefit from. Is there anyone then who you can shut out of your heart and not feel grateful for? Everyone is involved in some way. Of course, in Buddhism, we also go to the dimension of thinking about this is only this life. This is the play that we're all about in this life, and what's happening in the basis of the causes and conditions that are ripening for you in this life. In other lives, you were interacting with other beings who are strangers now, or the enemies were your friends, or all. It's like a huge revolving thing, and we never have any definiteness. The person who's your best friend, the closest person in this life, could have been your worst enemy in another life. In fact, they were. That's what the Buddha says. I mean, not that you should think about them through that lens. Don't think that you're going home to the person who's your worst enemy. You were my worst enemy in another life. I hate you now. No, I'm not telling you to do that. Because again, all three roles, there's some kindness there. There's something that we can choose to see as kindness. Now, when I use the word kindness, again, don't think in terms of that first one, the direct kindness, because that's a limiting definition. Kindness means, as was said here, a goodness that we've received. What's the goodness that we receive from enemies? The ability to work on our patience and our compassion and really enlarge our hearts. There's a story of Lama Atisha, who brought the Lamrim teachings to Tibet about 1,000 years ago. The story goes that he actually traveled with this Bengali tea boy, this like young guy who kind of took care of his belongings and tea and what have you, made the tea for him when he would stop on this journey. He did the amazing journey from like India to Tibet, with this small entourage. He brought this guy with him because he bugged the hell out of him. Atisha, like this Bengali tea boy, was like a thorn in his side, and he brought him because he wanted to practice patience. I mean, how cruel on the part of the tea boy, practicing this way, continuing to be kind of annoying. But again, maybe to many other people, the tea boy was just fine. This was Atisha's thing, that the karma he had with this boy was that it bugged him. And the story was that, he really thought that the people in Tibet were going to be very kind and gentle, and he wanted to make sure he had someone he could practice patience with, right? The story continues saying, well, once he got to Tibet, he realized that it wasn't a problem. He didn't need to bring the tea boy. They were plenty annoying, but that's how the Tibetans practice, kind of their own humility, that they're not such great practitioners, that actually, they were annoying too. But, we need those Bengali tea boys in our lives. We need people who are challenging us. You won't develop any really deep qualities without people who really test you. The other story that is told, shouldn't go too far into this, but the other story that's told is of the monk that is meditating up in the cave. And he's taking a little break, and sort of a lama is wandering by, and sees him up there, and he says, "Oh, so happy to see that you're meditating. What are you meditating on?" And the monk from his cave, yells down, "Oh, I'm meditating on patience." And he says, "Oh, can I come up and, sit with you for a little bit?" And he goes up into his cave, and, there's very few belongings, but he starts like messing with everything, throwing things around and doing all this. The lama's like, really just trying to, and then at some point, the monk gets really upset and like, "What the hell are you doing? Get out of my cave." And he says, "Where's your patience now?" We need other people to practice patience. You can't go sit in a cave. I mean, maybe you have creatures in the cave that you practice patience with, but we need that. It sounds strange. Again, I don't want you to think you go around annoying people so they become that for you. Don't become like the thorn in their side so that they do it for you. "Oh, I really just want to get your goat, so you'll give me an opportunity to practice." How cruel again. I don't want to suggest that in the least. We don't have to look very far, though. There's plenty of annoying people around, right? Maybe they're not here in this room. I don't think they're here in this room. But we are annoying to some other people, right? I mean, I'm sure I'm annoying to people, without a doubt. So the idea is that we need all three of these categories of people. The friends kind of gives us a basis to work from, right? Because when you do have that direct kindness, it's nice. We generally do have a bit of reciprocation going on. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. There is that kind of underlying motive that maybe is not as healthy, but we can be grateful that those people give us what we have quite directly. And again, the other two groups, as I explained, also we can extend some sense of gratitude. So let's talk about a few things that are kind of ways to adopt this attitude of gratitude, to be really grateful. But I hope you appreciated some grounding of gratitude in terms of the way we can apply it within some of the Lam Rim teachings that we can remind ourselves of frequently, that the gratefulness for others helps us to connect with them and so on. The first one I want to introduce you to is this wonderful practice that does come from Brother David. Maybe I'll tell you the story of how I met him and my very brief encounter with him. I mean, it was incredibly brief. My first partner died in 1992 in August, and in October of that year, I decided that I was going to kind of treat myself to a little week-long workshop. It was actually more of a kind of outdoor thing. We were kind of doing a kind of a being sacred in nature through Esalen, and many of you know of Esalen in the Big Sur area in California, beautiful area. And I was kind of in my period of grieving, and I go down there, and I'm, taking part of this this wonderful group of people who was there, very supportive of what I was going through. And the leader of the group, I sat at the table with him in the wonderful dining room they have there at Esalen, and I have my dinner or whatever, and he says, "Oh, I'd like to introduce you to Brother David." And sitting across from me was this amazing monk who's obviously an incredible practitioner of the teachings of Christ, which are really very close to the teachings of Buddha in many ways. So, he asked Brother David, like almost immediately, he says, "Brother David, would you mind sharing just a short poem with us?" And I guess this is something he does, that he has these poems that he memorizes. And it's a very, very short poem that I found out later is called Separation by a poet you probably heard of, W.S. Merwin. And it just really struck me. He said, "Your absence has gone through me like thread through a needle. Everything I see is stitched with your color." I'm like, he didn't even know I don't think he knew I was going through grieving. But this poem is really about when you're in the grieving process, how everything you see is stitched with the color of your loved one that you've lost. So anyway, it was kind of a magical experience meeting Brother David. So I've come through that experience to trust that he's got it going on. He's a really wise being. There are wise beings in all traditions. Don't think that, we're just hoarding the wise beings in the Buddhist tradition and they don't have them elsewhere. They're in other traditions as well. These beings who really walk the talk, who really live the teachings that they have adopted. Brother David has a technique that he calls, it's a three thing. It's based on kind of what we would do when we were kids, getting to an intersection. What did you learn? Get to an intersection of the road? First you stop, right? I mean, you don't keep going, you stop. That's a big order for us in our lives, right? We're on the go constantly. We're like hamsters on the wheel, right? We just keep going. So we need, to stop. You need to just be in a space of stillness. That's the first step. What do you do next? You look, right? And at that time it was look both ways, right? Some intersections you need to look at many different ways. But at least, look, open your eyes and look. That was this idea that was presented earlier by one of his students, again, Christy Nelson, who said, we need to be aware. We need to actually increase our awareness in that moment of stopping. Don't just stop. Yeah, stopping's a great thing, but become aware. And sometimes it can be the things that are in our environment that we just have neglected to pay attention to. And sometimes it can be simply bringing something to mind that we can have some gratitude for. But it means that we just open our eyes and kind of notice, observe, consider. Try to have a direct experience of that moment. This is the big thing that Brother David emphasizes with this gratefulness practice, is that every moment is rich with incredible opportunity. And I think this is a real gift that he gives us with this idea of this is what Buddhism we're really trying to practice, is to be present with every moment with the richness of what that moment affords. And by practicing gratitude, we can engage in that. That's the second step. Okay, so we stop, we look. And again, doesn't mean necessarily with your eyes. It means being aware. And then you awaken possibility from that place of having examined whatever it is that happened in that moment. That moment is yours. That moment's a precious moment. And you do with it what you will. But it's within a spirit of gratefulness, a spirit of appreciation for what that moment affords, for what it is that has influenced you. And then you use that as a means of going forward so that it doesn't become detached from the rest of your day and what follows. Because when we come from a place of gratitude, all these benefits that Robert Emmons that I shared with you, that those will come to fruition then, right? Because then we start living from a place of gratefulness. We acknowledge what has happened, we take action, we do something, make that into an opportunity. I like this technique, and actually it's really quite powerful if we start practicing it regularly. Again, it doesn't mean you stop every moment. You just occasionally stop. And maybe you even can set a little timer on your smartphone or something that goes off. A friend of mine used to do this, where it would just do a little silent, very low pitch gong or something like dong, and then you stop then. And you're in a different situation than you were an hour ago. And you just look, you observe, you be aware of what's happening, and you generate some feeling of appreciation and gratitude. And then you go forward from that place. I guarantee if you do this a number of times every day, you're going to relate to your life and the people around you very differently. You're going to experience, things that you haven't experienced before, because you'll be much more open-hearted throughout your day. Another way that I think you can remember to do this practice, there was that film called The Secret, which was kind of interesting. Parts of it were very Buddhist and parts of it were maybe another kind of philosophy, but in The Secret they talked about having a gratitude stone or something that you would keep in your pocket, so that every time you put your hand in your pocket, then you would feel it and you go, oh, I can be grateful. We have many different ways. Sometimes people will wear something that occasionally they'll hold, maybe a stone or some sort of pendant. Whatever works for you. Some people like to put Post-its someplace where they pass by occasionally. Like if you're only going by some part of your work, an occasion, then you put the Post-it there. So every time you see it, you go, oh yeah, I want to practice that. We need cues to be mindful and aware sometimes. Unless you've got a really deep practice of mindfulness, and I was talking about this a little bit yesterday, how I think mindfulness, if you haven't done those sorts of mindfulness courses, often called MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, it kind of gives you another tool in your utility belt. A lot of Batman references here, Batman used to have all these things that he would pull things out, like you pull out your mindfulness. Your mindfulness you use most of the day, though. It's not something you only use on occasion. But then you're kind of aware, oh yeah, this is how I want to be. Rinpoche was always really, when he would talk about mindfulness, many of you remember, he'd always say, mindfulness of what? Mindfulness of what? Well, again, mindfulness of this spirit of gratefulness, mindfulness of connection to others, mindfulness of having love and compassion for all beings, mindfulness of emptiness, whatever it is that you are practicing, you can bring that into your mind through having some dedicated awareness to it. But if you're kind of going about your life mindlessly, well, then you're not going to pay attention. You're going to miss a lot. You're going to miss a lot of opportunities is the big thing. You've got opportunities at every moment. That's, again, Brother David's whole thing. Every moment is rich with opportunity. So I hope that's a little practice that you can adopt. You can certainly find things on the internet. I think there's even like a whole workbook around this whole technique and different exercises you can do to enhance it. Another thing that I want to introduce, though, in regard to this, that kind of fits nicely into it, is from a book that I've been reading by Rick Hanson. Many of you know Rick Hanson. He wrote the book, The Buddha's Brain. I think that's one of his more popular ones. He also is a researcher, and he's done a lot of work around many of the things taught in Buddhism. And one of the books he wrote not that long ago, but it took me a while to kind of get around to it. And I began the year thinking it's got 12 chapters on 12 different things that are qualities that help us to be resilient. And that's actually the name of the book, is Resilient. Let me make sure I'm giving the right title. I think there's even a subtitle. Resilient, How to Grow an Unshakable Core of Calm, Strength, and Happiness. And because of his connection to Buddhism, I really wanted to read it. And I thought, well, it'd be good to take each month, do one of the 12 and try to really focus on it. I think I got to like 5 or 6 and then my life got too crazy and I had to put the book aside, and I'll have to start the rest of them whenever I pick it up again. But I think number 6 is gratitude, gratefulness. He uses this technique, though, that is actually taught in one of the earlier chapters on learning. He says learning is a quality we need for resilience, to be constantly learning from everything that we go through. But that gets applied to gratitude and many of the other qualities. It's a little acronym that's really easy for us to learn. HEAL, heal. Okay? What does the H stand for? This is part of what he calls the activation process. It's have a beneficial experience. We can notice it or we can create it. And this is where, like, again, we can simply create a moment of gratitude, or you can notice a moment of gratitude. Someone has done something for you, and you have that beneficial experience. We try, again, positive psychology. We're trying to have more beneficial experience, be aware of more beneficial things in our lives. It starts with that moment of having that. What does the E stand for? We get now into the next three that are called his installation process. We have the activation, which begins with the H, having that beneficial experience. And then we have the installation of that in a deeper way through first enriching it. That's the E in heal. Stay with it, feeling it fully. Try to kind of relish that. So it might be adopted in terms of Brother David's technique, the first moment of kind of you stop, and then you have that experience of being grateful in the moment for everything. You can stay there for a while, folks. You don't have to necessarily run out, and with the go. You can actually extend that, prolong that through this technique. Enrich it. Begin to feel even deeper and deeper levels of gratitude. Gratitude is kind of a bottomless thing, right? You don't kind of get to the end of it. You just keep going and creating more and more of it. It doesn't stop at any point, as long as you keep feeding it, as long as you keep enriching it. So enrich it is the E. Absorb it. This is where you kind of receive it into yourself. You really just feel your whole being filled with that feeling of gratefulness in this case. Kind of taking it again to a much deeper level. The last one is actually optional, so I guess you could do he or heal, depending upon whether you wanted to add that. It's called link it. Use it to soothe and replace painful, harmful psychological material. Again, we all carry a lot of wounds, right? We all have a lot of things from our life, or maybe even things that are going on in our life currently that are really challenging. If you link those feelings, this is how we increase our learning. It is optional, but if you link them up to kind of be the counterforce to something that is a pain that we've carried, a wound we have, a way that we just need to heal ourselves, then it becomes a very powerful antidote to that. And we all are carrying our share of all of that in this world. There's no one out there who isn't wounded, right? I think there's that phrase, I can never remember who said it, that, if we could just see, the burdens that others are carrying in their lives, we wouldn't have a moment of animosity towards them in the least. Because even, again, those horrible, horrible people are under the burden of so much mental garbage, right? So much stuff that has influenced them, that makes them who they are. So again, just kind of to be able to link it ourselves with what has wounded us. Maybe, for example, I certainly know people. I've been blessed with having two very good parents. My father had his moments. He was in the army, so he wasn't quite like the great Santini, but it was close at times. So the idea is that, we've got some stuff we could replace that with. Maybe there's times where we don't feel so grateful for our parents because they weren't the ideal parents, the perfect parents. They were your parents nonetheless, So we can kind of replace and link up this sort of gratefulness for what we have now that our parents contributed to. If your parents didn't take care of you, you wouldn't be here right now, We do have this happen in the world. It happened in New Mexico a couple of times recently where babies were abandoned in dumpsters and things. They've actually put baby drops at fire stations now where people can bring an unwanted baby so that at least gets taken care of. You were taken care of. Whatever happened, even if you were left at a fire station, you were still taken care of or you wouldn't be here. Kind of replace some of that wounding we feel from not having had ideal parents, not having had what we would have ideally wanted to have at that age, with this feeling of gratefulness. Kind of link it so that you then get deeper healing from it. Gratitude can be amazing in terms of this because it doesn't erase it completely. I'm not saying that you just kind of neglect that ever happened. It begins to pattern your mind so that becomes the more sustaining thought. When you think about your parents, you tend to think in terms of of gratefulness for them, as opposed to some friction around them because they didn't do this, because they abandoned you. Remember Venerable Rabina, when she was talking to one student's question, they were speaking on this whole fact of like, oh, well, my parents were horrible, blah, 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 the whole litany of things that parents can do, right? And hopefully we haven't done as parents, those of you who are parents. But Venerable Rabina said, well, at least your mother didn't abort you, dear. Even if they abandoned you, did all sorts of horrible things, at least they let you come out into this world with this perfect human life. How amazing, how wonderful. So, there's a measure of kindness and just, whatever is going on. Okay, so those are some of the techniques. Again, this heal technique I've been working with because of this book, and I think it does really work. When you do that kind of stop thing, the middle part where you're doing the look, you can go into this whole thing of kind of, okay, I'm having that experience of what's going on right now, the gratefulness. I'm going to enrich it by kind of to really deepen it. I'm going to absorb it into my being. And I'm going to even link it potentially with the things that are the wounds that I need to heal from. Again, it's not Buddhist wisdom. The Buddha didn't teach the Heal Sutra. It's not like I'm sharing with you some secret teaching, that the Buddha had. But it's influenced by Buddhist psychology and an understanding of it that, again, is very much mirrored in positive psychology that is going on in the Western world as well. And I think it's important that we take advantage of that knowledge. That's why His Holiness meets with all these people from Western sciences, right? Because he thinks there's some jewels there. There's some real good stuff there. And Buddhism has some good stuff that we can share with them as well. So it's great that these dialogues are going on and all of this. A few other practices. I want to give just a couple minutes at least for some questions or comments. That many people emphasize is gratitude journaling. In the Book of Joy, His Holiness and Archbishop Desmond Tutu with Douglas Abrams, they talk about some practices of gratitude because gratitude is one of the 8 pillars of joy. And one of them is gratitude journaling. And maybe at the end of each day, you think about, or if you feel inclined to write, you write down 3 things from that day that you're grateful for, or from even that moment that you're grateful for. Practices like this were part of Robert Emmons' study. Encouraging people to have more moments of gratefulness in their life. Another one is writing a gratitude letter. Perhaps there are people who you feel in your life that you no longer can thank, people who have left this world at this time, and we want to say thank you to them, or people who maybe we're not quite ready to re-engage in a relationship with. Say you have had a difficult relationship with siblings or parents, and you don't necessarily want to send them a letter and re-engage because of the pain that could be there. You still can write a letter of gratitude to them. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. This is actually said to be a very powerful exercise because it gets us into a space of actually articulating in written words. When you actually get the kinesthetic thing of writing things, you have another layer of learning, another layer of kind of unfolding to these. There's also, well, I think those are the main things that I wanted to talk about. There's many other practices out there, though. Don't think that, I've given you an exhaustive list of the ways that you can practice gratefulness. But find what works for you. Try some of these on. See what happens. See the effects. This is the way we should be approaching all the Buddhist teachings, like we're scientists. And we're like, oh, this is the hypothesis that if I practice gratitude and gratefulness, I will be happier, more content, other people, and so on. All the benefits that we see. Try it and see if it happens. I'm betting it will. It's up to you. Proof is in the pudding, as they say. Any comments or questions from anybody?
If you do have something and you're here in the Gampa, Don Brown in the back, Laura, just raise your hand. If you are online, just type it in the chat. If you're on YouTube, and just get my attention if you are on Zoom.
Yes, Don.
Hey, could you say something about gratitude and the practice of joyfulness, of rejoicing?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was actually, I did bring that up when I taught this originally and kind of missed it in my notes for today. The practice of rejoicing is where we take joy and delight in what we have. We can actually practice that in tandem with gratitude then, right? Hopefully we're already having a joyful experience when we have those grateful moments, those appreciative moments. But taking joy in others in particular, as well as ourselves, There's nothing really self-centered about starting with ourselves, because why do we take kind of a joy, have a practice of rejoicing, being really joyful at all the good things that we do or that we have in our lives? Not so that we become full of ourselves and get all prideful. It's so that we encourage ourselves to continue to do these things, to continue to be creating the good karma, the good actions that allow us to have those things that are very useful. It's useful to have food on the table and a place to live and all the things that contribute to our well-being. So we want to kind of feed that through rejoicing. And it also does act, they say in the Buddhist teachings, it also increases kind of the merit of having done that. When you rejoice in your own actions, you're like multiplying the effect of what you did karmically. So rejoicing adds another layer to it. It's not just having the pure joyful mind, it's bringing it to with an attentive awareness of what we have done that has created all of that through our own karma. So we start with ourselves, then we think about others and others' good deeds and good actions. And some of it we may be the object of. People who do things for us, people who, are teaching the Dharma for us, like Geshe Gelek does so faithfully here for you, and Geshe Sangpo, all these teachers who give of themselves, sacrifice, their lives in a sense. They could be doing many other things with their lives, right? But they're dedicated to teaching all of you as a community. Can rejoice in all their amazing actions. We want to, go to that place of rejoicing in others and rejoicing in especially those very high-level beings that we want to have connection with, and we want to really appreciate what they do. Rejoice that they do what they do. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is tireless in all of his efforts to benefit people in this world. You can rejoice. You don't even have to know what His Holiness did today, right? I don't have to know what he's doing in Dharamsala. I just can simply rejoice that His Holiness is up to wonderful good things. Meeting with people, giving teachings, whatever it is, it's all good stuff. So rejoicing becomes kind of an additional practice that you can do in tandem with it. As you have this feeling of gratefulness for the things in your life, you can bring an awareness to kind of all the forces that create all of that. Because again, in Buddhism, everything arises from karma. If you're having good things in your life, or even the negative things in your life, these are all arising through your karma. And again, because it's a negative thing, we can choose to see it in a different light, as we see from these other teachings, the Lojong teachings. So everything is an opportunity for both of those, for gratitude and for rejoicing. I remember at the Light of the Path retreat in 2014, I was going down to the Kadampa there, and it was at the very beginning of the day, the morning practice, and it was the only day that rained. It was weird. I had some premonition around, like, be really careful if it rains. I mean, just because it's dark in some parts of the pathways in that. And there was one part where there wasn't much light, and there was a bit of asphalt missing from one of the kind of steps or whatever. It was kind of on that walkway where you go down from the main building to the Kadampa. I was coming down from Lee Hall, and I kind of hit that. I tripped in that, and I went forward, and the glasses I had then went all across my face here. I've got the scar from it. This is my 2014 scar. I know, I don't have any more scars. But anyway, it was kind of just traumatic in the sense of, like, this isn't what I wanted to happen on retreat, right? You don't think you go on retreat to, like, have these accidents and end up with a big bloody gash across your face and people looking at you weird in the Kadampa all the time. But Venerable Rabina shows up at this retreat. She actually had heard that Rinpoche said something that made it sound like he might not be back for another one or something. I don't know. She came running from Brazil, I think it was. And, she looks at me and, and I've got this gash kind of here, and I go, yeah, I fell the other morning. She's, oh, congratulations. And I'm like going, congratulations, It's a weird way of looking, but you can even rejoice when negative stuff happens to us. First of all, it's a ripening of that karma that came into our lives, and it's lesser than it probably would have been if it had kept accumulating all this negative energy. That's one of the truths they say about karma, is it expands, it multiplies. So we can say congratulations when something happens to us that's kind of negative. You don't want to say that to somebody who's not Buddhist. They're going to look at you like you're weird, like, what in the hell are you talking about? Right? But if, and even you can think it inside, just to kind of rejoice that people do have that coming in forward, and then have compassion and empathy for them as well, because we all do need that too. But Venerable Rabina was sure that she got me to get that message, that I should be feeling really good about this. So rejoicing, again, is something that we can do that can be in regard to pretty much anything. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, it was in my notes, and I saw it this morning when I was looking things over, and I just missed it. So you're doing a good job, Don. You've been doing that all weekend. So not me, Don Brown.
We have a student on Zoom asking, who was the author of the poem that Brother David shared with you?
Yeah.
Separation. Separation was the name of the poem.
Yes, Separation by W.S. Merwin, Merwin. You can find it online. If you put in Separation by Merwin even, you will get it. And it's, again, very brief poem. I think I've gotten the words right. I've said it often enough that I'm pretty sure that I got it right. And I'm always stumbling on whether it says everything I see is stitched with your color or its color. It might be its color. And then it's a slightly different meaning, but nonetheless, it's getting at the same thing. That when we're separated from others, everything becomes kind of tinged with that. You're wearing grief-colored glasses in a way, and you're kind of experiencing the world through those lenses. Anyone else before we conclude? Yes?
And one more person on Zoom. It's not a question.
Okay.
Okay, real quick. It's not a question, it's just a comment. This student wants you to know, I really appreciate this teaching being available online. I especially need this today as I was inordinately ornery and upset about waking up so much earlier than I needed or wanted to this morning, despite perfect weather for sleeping in. I get really cranky when I don't get as much sleep as I need or want, despite all my efforts to sleep. Not getting enough sleep increases my anxiety, etc. I really want to learn how to have a better attitude when I wake up unnecessarily early.
Well, thank you. And I hope that that helps this person as well as all of us to, kind of have if the benefits, as Robert Emmons has found, are there, then by practicing gratitude and waking up with a more grateful mind, we should see that we sleep better and that we're more rested and that we have greater physical benefits as well. So great, thank you. And a comment or a question in the back, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I have a question about contentment. So how do we reconcile contentment with capitalism? Because our economy is based upon at least a fraction of the population always wanting to have more or something better, like the iPhones, right? That gives jobs to people and turns the wheels of economy. At the same time, it also creates some problems in other countries like slavery and other practices.
Exactly.
So how do we reconcile capitalism and contentment?
Thank you for that question. That's a big topic. Again, if everyone lived in a space of kind of contentment and being okay with what they have, you might not have a large gross national product, but you might have a higher gross happiness product. They do this in some countries, right, where they measure the happiness of the people in the country as opposed to the product that we produce, the sort of dollars and all those numbers. It's difficult, though, because again, we can say that there are people that do produce many of the things that feed this kind of chain of desire and wanting and more and what have you. But there's a lot of people involved in kind of capitalistic venture that are simply producing things that benefit others. Look at the medical profession, we're constantly trying to improve the way surgeries can be done or things like that help beings who are needing those procedures. There's huge advancements that have been made in medicine due to the kindness of many. There's plenty of kind of business out there that's not all caught up in feeding desire, but obviously many things do. Many of the other products that we have are definitely about that. I guess the message is more that each of us individually needs to have a consciousness and awareness around that, so we don't kind of get on that constant more sort of thing. We live with a space of contentment. As I said, if the whole world was in a space of contentment, well, maybe we'd find other things that people would do that they would still be paid for that wouldn't be involved in all of that. I don't know. It's hard to imagine a world where that is there. I think in more socialist countries, you do perhaps have the potential for that to happen when socialism is adopted at a very more genuine level. Was told once by one Buddhist student, and I kind of concur, that if you're Buddhist, you pretty much have to be socialist at some level, because capitalism by its nature will tend to feed greed and so many more things that are not good. Like you said, you have the potential for people being abused in the workforce, slavery, what have you, and resources being managed not so well. I mean, so many companies in the United States just pay the penalties for doing the things that they do rather than being conscientious about what they do, right? They're happy to pay a penalty to a country somewhere if they pollute the waters there from their factory, but they don't really want to not pollute because they don't want to produce things in a more economically and environmentally conscious way. So the idea is that it's a big issue. Let's try it. I mean, seriously, if we lived in a world where people had more genuine contentment, and people were also finding deeper sources of contentment, everything right now for most people is outside of themselves, right? These are what bring me happiness and well-being. The whole emphasis in Buddhism is that sources of contentment are actually much deeper inside ourselves. Let's, invest in kind of a increase in all of the good qualities and all of that in our world, and not be so concerned necessarily about the outside, and see what happens. It'd be an interesting experiment. Maybe there are countries where, again, they've even adopted that to some degree, not fed the kind of accumulation of goods sort of thing, and tried to really look at an internal development. I think Tibet was kind of like that, right? They're not very advanced technologically or anything. They weren't, certainly. But they were very rich in inner resources, So I can't answer your question because it gets to be a bit hypothetical, but at the same time, I think the principles would apply. It would be interesting to see what would shift and what would change in a capitalist world. Maybe it could no longer be capitalist. Maybe it would change and transform into something else. I don't know. Yeah, you have let's get the microphone here from Linda. Yeah, sure.
This will need to be our last one, since we do need
We are a
to
little
break.
over.
I was just going to say, I read about longevity and blue zones, and
Uh-huh.
a lot of that concept, I think, has to do with contentment, that it's not all about material things. It's about your community and keeping life simple. So I think it's something to strive for.
Yeah, definitely. There's a new book out too, another book on my shelf I need to read, called The Good Life, which is a study of kind of what brings well-being to people. And like you're saying, it's primarily the connection we have with others. And of course, in Buddhism, this is what we emphasize, especially in Mahayana Buddhism. This is what brings real joy. The real richness of life is an appreciation for that. So again, just to conclude, I really hope that what I've shared with you today is of some benefit. And even if there's just like one thing that you can take away from today, because it was a lot, right? A lot of different things and ideas. Just one thing. Just hold that thought and say, okay, I'm going to just try to practice that. I'm just going to try to have more awareness of that. Be the scientist and see what results you get. And then report back to me. No, you don't have to do that. But anyway, so thank you.
Thank you. And I did want to let you know, again, Don, that people on Zoom as well as YouTube are extending their appreciation for this wonderful teaching.
Well, I'm grateful for them and for all of you. So, okay, so we're going to recite these wonderful verses. We have this gift of having been together in the spirit of gratefulness. We want to kind of give that positive potential to others. This is the kind of circle of things karmically, is that this actually gives us even more merit and richness in our lives by giving it away to others, by thinking that through what we've done, the seeds we planted, all the positive thoughts that we've had, may this become the fruition for others in terms of their freedom from suffering, in terms of their being able to attain their happiness and well-being. And that will, again, create the causes for your own well-being. You're never really giving anything away. You're only receiving in the process of giving, right? What's that from the prayer of St. Francis? It's through giving that I receive, This is the circle that we're involved in, and gratefulness is very much a part of. So thinking about other beings, all beings, but more specifically, even thinking about those beings whose suffering moves you right now. We each have individuals, people, or even parts of the world, again, where it breaks our heart that others are experiencing some difficulty. As we go through this prayer, let's hold them in our hearts while we say these words.
It's page 246 in the Gold Prayer Book.
And these are from Master Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may these never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And let's also dedicate for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is very fond of this prayer and who has an amazing presence in this world, not just for Buddhists, but for so many people in this world. We're going to recite this prayer for his good health and long life.
Page 244.
In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And then, okay, and then we can also dedicate for all those other teachers that we have who are still with us, that they may have good health and long lives. And then, as you all know, our dear spiritual director, Kyabji Zopa Rinpoche, passed away in April, and we want to be making strong prayers for his swift return, for our being able to benefit from his presence in this world again.
The swift return prayers in the back inside cover of the Gold Prayer Book.
So we'll recite these 4 verses together. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and upspreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the 3 jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And I'm really appreciative of all of you being here and allowing me to share what I have been able to share with you. And again, I do hope you're able to put some of this into benefit for your own well-being and for others. So thank you so much.
Thank you. For those of you who are going to come back for the last part of the weekend workshop, we'll meet back here at 1:30. If you are staying on campus, hopefully you brought a lunch. If not, feel free to go grab something and bring it back. Otherwise, we'll see you back here at 1:30 for those of you coming to clarifying the middle way as we wrap that up. Thank you. All right, thanks everyone online. Thank you so much for being here with us. Bye. See some of you at 1:30.